this might be helpful in your papers.
Mhm.
So the idea here,
This,
yeah, go ahead.
This is actually one of the parts that I didn't quite clearly understand about
Okay.
respect the law for governance and respecting the law itself.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
respect.
I mean, let's
Go ahead.
treat that as a question, because we had this trouble. I'm not sure whether you explain it later in the protocol, but it is important for you to understand. We have this dilemma of respect for the law is an important abstract concept that, you know, is at the foundation of civilized societies. Let's just leave that discussion aside. But then there's a law, that there's an actual law on the books or whatever. So you think it's wrong. You think it is immoral. So that is very difficult to reconcile with the idea of respecting the law. So should you respect the law that you clearly think to be immoral? Like, you know, in the case of the American society, that's the laws of slavery. So the question, therefore, what Kant is saying is that not specific actual empirical laws that is always respected, but the idea of lawfulness, the idea of the law is respected. So what you respect in the person is the ability to give a law onto him or herself, right, on themselves. So here, that serves as a criterion to decide which law can be rationally accepted or not. Now, something like slavery, according to Kantian logic, should obviously not be consistent with the universalizability principle. So what you are respecting is the structure, the logic of the law, rather than a specific law that may or may not be just. Is this point clear? Now, as to whether you should follow that law is an entirely different question. You shouldn't. I mean, obviously today we would say you shouldn't follow that law. But then, would that mean that you don't respect the lawfulness? No, I respect the lawfulness. Just that empirical law itself doesn't even fulfill the criterion of lawfulness because it cannot be consistently a universal law. Now, Kant give us a way out of this problem that I posed. Okay, seems to give a way out of this problem that I posed. Do we follow unjust laws? Now, that seems to be his possible test for a law that cannot be consistently rationally universalized, cannot be imposed. So therefore, now, should you follow that law? Like if you are Descartes, I guess you would, because he doesn't care. He's like, okay, I'm going to follow the laws of my society, etc. But for Kant, that's a separate question. But at least you have a rational justification of why you don't follow this law, while you respect law governance. So I'm just merely repeating the same point. Any question about this? Anybody is unclear? Thank you, Rosie. That was an emphatic no. Okay, go ahead.
Another notable question that was asked was, what differentiates freedom from absolute freedom? In conclusion, we determined that people who possess freedom can choose different laws of freedom to follow, and people with absolute freedom can act upon the laws of morality.
Okay, there's something wrong in that sentence. What is it?
Is it backwards?
Well, there are three freedom, the word freedom in that sentence. One of them is not supposed to be. Which one? You just said it a minute ago. Anybody? Do we act according to different laws of freedom, or did you mean to say according to different laws of nature?
Yeah, I think I meant nature.
Well, you should have meant nature, because laws of freedom and laws of morality are the same, and that's what you follow when you are absolutely free. Now, the point that I was trying to explain there is that most of the time in society, when we say we are free, we are really preferring this law of nature over that law of nature. So, I mean, there might be laws of nature that human beings can decide to follow or not, but that still doesn't make you free according to Kant. So the example I gave is that, again, I don't know why it's, in the morning, I guess we are all hungry, whatever. So I'm hungry, I want to eat. That's a law of nature. But I don't kill 5 people in order to eat if I cannot find food immediately, because I also have the psychological condition of being afraid of being punished. And so human beings also have this, I don't know, law of self-preservation. Like if I kill people, I'm going to suffer the consequences, etc. So therefore, I act in accordance, still in accordance with the laws of nature, but sometimes in my person, not in itself, but in my person, these laws of nature are in tension with each other. That seems to be also what Kant would understand. He doesn't say it, but what we consider to be what people say in society when I'm free to do this. And you can think of this in pretty much every conception of freedom. Okay, is everybody clear? Okay, go ahead. So cross out freedom, the second freedom, put laws of nature.
Clay?
Okay. We then discuss whether or not we can have both happiness and freedom. In our society, we assume that freedom is a result from happiness, but in fact, freedom is a result of following the moral law. Morality is the utmost importance for our freedom. Once we start striving to achieve happiness within our morality, we start to put a higher emphasis on happiness rather than following the moral law. To be moral is to be free. Once we start searching for the happiness in our moral acts, we begin to hold happiness to a high importance, making us no longer free, as we now are following the natural law instead of the moral law. Happiness is instead the satisfaction of morality, not freedom. We then came to the conclusion that freedom itself is the purpose and morals are the recipe for getting there.
Well, the expression that Kant uses is the worthiness of happiness. So the important point, because happiness is the satisfaction of all of your inclinations, supposedly. So morality for him is to be worthy of happiness, not necessarily the actual happiness. Mm-hmm. And this is, people that you encounter that somehow claim that they are superior to other people because acting morally make them happy. Acting morally makes them happy, and they really propose this as a kind of superiority to other people. And for Kant, that's just doesn't have anything to do with morality. So if you have those people around you, you can tell them, you might be happy, but you are not worthy of happiness. Mm. And don't be mean to people, but you might think that in your head. Okay.
We then discussed that you cannot command someone to be happy. You can do things to try to make them happy, such as buy them gifts or have a smiling face, but happiness comes from within oneself. With that said, happiness cannot be a moral principle. Happiness cannot be a moral principle because you cannot create laws of happiness, and you cannot make laws that someone can follow in order to be happy. We then spent some time discussing the differences between a hypothetical imperative and autonomy, in which we found the hypothetical imperatives usually go with heteronomy, and autonomy usually goes with categorical imperatives. We then discussed the importance of lying and how it is a hypothetical imperative. According to Kant, lying is a hypothetical imperative because people only lie to achieve something else. For example, people may lie to make themselves look better, such as hyperbolizing their achievements in a sport, or they may lie to get themselves out of trouble, such as telling a police officer they were not drinking before they drove, even if they did. In each of these cases, the person is lying to get what they want out of the situation, or rather to avoid the situation entirely, which makes lying a hypothetical imperative. We discussed that people do not usually just lie, and they often lie to themselves first and do not realize that they are lying. We then learned that if someone always boasts about themselves, it may be a good life lesson to question whether or not they are lying to you and whether or not they are lying to themselves.
Okay, just somebody finish that thought. What is then his, what is the presupposition in one person lying?
Can you say that one more time?
What is the presupposition in order to achieve an end, which is another end, since therefore it is hypothetical. So if you don't want to go to jail, don't tell that you are drinking, right? So what is the presupposition behind this act of lying, according to Kant? And that's the why principle of lying cannot be universalized. I'm sure somebody can answer this.
Is this like what you were talking about with how if everyone lies, then there's no expectation of truth, and so then lying doesn't work? So in order to lie, it has to not be universal in order for lying to work, I guess.
Exactly. So you are relying on the universality of the moral principle of not lying, so that your lie as an exception can function and get you out of trouble. And, you know, but like nobody would believe somebody telling that they are not drinking, therefore they would put them to test. So that wouldn't actually even work. But you get the idea that in order for me to be successfully lie, I need to want at the same time the universal condition of telling truth be the case, be the law. Is that clear to everybody? You need to explain this logic in your papers, and it's an important logical aspect of, I mean, I use the term logic a little loosely here, but what you would call the rational aspect of moral law. Okay? I'm asking seriously, are there any questions? Are you clear about this? Because you have 2 days to finish this. Oh, well.
Wait, so the paper isn't due tomorrow, it's due the next day?
Who said that it's tomorrow? Did I ever say it's tomorrow?
No, I mean, I'm really bad at the calendar, so I don't even know what day of the week it is.
I saw on Moodle it's like 11 a.m.
I am bad with the calendar. There are like numbers on it. You just have to look at them.
No, I'm not even kidding. I'm not even kidding you. This is not a joke. It's like I like the concept of 7 days and 4 days. I get that messed up so much. So like when people are saying that it's like the 18th, I'll often think that Monday is like the last day of the week or something, or the last day of the month. Like, oh, it's really bad.
Okay. Well, the paper is due on the 30th.
Okay. Well, I don't know what day it is today. So.
Today is Monday, 28th.
Oh, it's the 28th.
Due in 2 days.
Yes. It's literally like 48 hours, 49 hours from now. Is that clear to everybody? Yes. Good.
I have one question. Another question also like related to deadline stuff, but it's not like because I lost track of time, but like if I send it early, do I get anything like I don't know like extra credit or something or?
You get my gratitude.
Okay, thank you because I just finished my history exam and now I'm starting to catch up with all the philosophy work that I have been doing. Like I need to write from the baseline.
So like if you submit your paper, like I checked last time, it was yesterday, I think nobody had submitted yet. So as soon as you submit it, I'm gonna start grading it. So, and then I prepared all your other contributions to the class. So I'm really waiting for the final paper. And it is actually, the grades is literally due for Thursday, the 1st October at 4. So I will have 28 hours to grade all these papers. But I asked them like, I'm probably not going to be able to do that. So I will submit it a little late. But so please, if you finish it and if you are confident, please submit it.
Okay, one more question about the grades. So, because you know this semester is weird because of something. When will we know the grades of our class? We're supposed to be like on the last day of the semester or last day of fall one?
As if I understand it correctly, it is real time. So as soon as I submit the grades and the registrar's office approves them, then you will be able to see them. But I mean, that's what I think is going to happen, but don't quote me on this, like if it doesn't happen. That's my understanding. Nolia, yes.
You said that we could rework our first essay and then turn it in with the second.
Yeah.
Is that still true?
Yeah, that is still true, yes.
Then where should we submit it? Should we just email it to you, or is there a certain spot on Moodle?
Oh, you should just email it to me.
Okay, awesome.
Because I cannot follow other, like, yeah, just email it to me. But I do really need your first version.
Mhm.
So if you got it physically at the heart, the first version, you need to come to Carpenter 328 and drop off your first paper, the first version. Is that clear? Otherwise, I won't be able to grade it. Are we all on the same page right now? Are we all good? Any questions? Is anybody like tuning out and not aware what's happening? Okay, good. All right, so continuing with the, oh.
Alright. Lastly, we finished up Tuesday's class by discussing that you cannot see morality. You cannot look at someone and know that they are free or that they are acting freely. Your culture and your family may give you a certain way of acting, such as owning a gun rather than just owning a gun because you are free to do so. This brought about the final point on Tuesday, which was hopefully that philosophy stays with you as a question for the rest of your life and not just until the end of class.
That sounds good. Okay. I mean, did you get the idea about like owning the gun?
What did you say?
Did you all get the idea about owning a gun and
Yeah, sorry.
why it may or may not be an expression of freedom? Yes? No? Question? Ambiguity?
Could you explain it just to make sure that we get it?
Yeah.
The point was similar to the previous one, just following a certain laws that are heteronomous outside of you. So you may think, or many people think, that owning a gun is a freedom. Now, it is freedom maybe to the extent that it is described as such in the law, but from a Kantian perspective, that cannot be an expression or understanding of freedom because you really don't know why you are doing what you are doing. So I know everybody is looking at Isau's cat. so nobody is listening to me, but that is cool. Yeah, maybe we should, why you believe that, what societal forces somehow determine your desire to own a gun, etc. So that kind of expression of freedom in a given situation cannot, for Kant, be true freedom. And also, like, there are different laws concerning having guns. So you also have to think culturally. You are the only free people because you own guns over other people who are also rational human beings who choose not to have guns. So it is. So what I'm saying is that that notion of freedom is not how Kant understands freedom at all. So you don't, and also that applies to other people who sort of think that you should not have a gun. Like, you don't know why you even think that you should not have a gun. So Kant really doesn't give you any, advice about gun control or lack thereof in the United States. It just is resisting of formulating this question in terms of freedom. And yeah, and then you have to be able to afford guns. And if you don't have money, you can't buy guns. So what kind of freedom is that to own something which is like, it doesn't make sense. So yeah. And again, I'm not like, I mean, I am, but I'm not saying that you should or should not have guns. It's just that it cannot be justified on the basis of the idea of freedom. That I want to stay with you for the rest of your life, because I'm sure that you will encounter this question many times in the future. Okay, continue, please. On Thursday, yeah.
On Thursday, we continued asking our questions from the book. First, we discussed the concept of a priori principles. Within morality, a priori is not associated with an experience. They must be independent of all experience in order for them to be universal. Experience by nature can always be something else depending on the context of the situation. A priori is independent from experience, not prior. If you know something to be moral, you cannot experience the consequences to decide if it is moral or not. You have to know before any experience whether or not your actions are moral or not. From that, you have to judge it by its principle.
Just one clarification so that you don't get confused. You say 3 lines up from the end of that paragraph, a priori is independent from experience, not prior. I meant to say, I don't know what you said, that not just prior temporally, independent. It's prior, but not just prior. It is prior. Yeah, I mean, when you say that it's not prior, it might imply posterior or post-experience. It's not. It is, but it's not a temporal priority. It is independent. You're right in that. Just to clarify. Okay.
The next question we address whether it would be undermines morality by making freedom a desire. From here, we looked at the concept of morality. When someone wants or desires to be moral, they become immoral. Morality should not be a desire or want, but instead an act.
Okay, I'm sorry again, just to clarify one thing. I hope it's not immoral. It's amoral. So just because you want it, and that was, I don't know, somebody asked that, I remember, it doesn't make you immoral. It just is not morality according to Kant. So just to be clear, so that you don't think like, if I want to be moral, I'm going to end up being immoral.
Yeah, I have a question about that actually. So to Kant, there is no immorality, or that doesn't exist?
Well, you brought that up at the end of the protocol, which you will talk about, but I introduced the notion of evil. Mm-hmm. So that comes up in the protocol, and we'll discuss about that. And yes, that seems to be immoral is really, if we understand it as literally evil, like doing something freely that is bad. Because it seems like Kant believes that if we do something freely, it's always good. So is it possible for humans to act freely and evil? Now, of course, if you follow laws of nature, most of the time that is the cause of the actions that we consider to be not good or immoral for Kant. So, but since the laws of nature are universal and independent of us, that is really not strong enough to explain what only human beings can do. It's not in nature. It is evil. Is that clear? Like, we'll come to that again at the end of the protocol. I looked at it. So you bring up the issue. So let's read that and then come back to the question. Okay?
The desire to be free is an inclination which correlates with heteronomy instead of autonomy. We all can have a rational interest to be moral, but we should not be moral for the sake of anybody else, but for the sake of itself. You should be indifferent to its being. If you really want to be moral, do not make it known to anybody, because once you have made it known you want to be moral, you're expressing a desire to be seen that way.
Okay, in your papers, don't write sentences like you should be indifferent to its being, because I'm going to say what, etc. So just make sure that you are clear. I'm going to let it go here, but just warning you. Okay.
Next, we discuss whether or not freedom in moral law is a paradox. To understand this question, we must look at the phrase, everything acts in accordance with law. There is always a reason as to what we are doing. Whether we do something we desire and believe we are free doing so, we are following the natural law rather than the moral law. We are always mistaken that thinking what we want is not what we actually want. Everything we do out of desire correlates with nature. So the paradox is not between freedom and law, but there is no possibility of being free outside of the law. Freedom instead should be a cause of something within yourself. From here, we make the comparison of freedom being more of a responsibility than an action. We have to respond to the moral law and uphold it, so in a sense, it is a responsibility.
Okay, so just since you are quoting at the second line of that paragraph, everything in nature works according to laws. That's what Kant says. Just if you are quoting that for your paper, just be careful to quote it correctly. Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Albert.
Yeah. We went on to discuss what Kant meant by ends in themselves and means to an end. From here, ends to themselves is moral because action does not want a particular outcome or desire. A means to an end is not moral because the action is done with the intent of a particular outcome. I meant to say probably amoral. So, human beings need to be treated as an end to themselves, not a means to an end. A lot of people use morality as an afterthought. However, there can be no moral high road after you take action. Lastly, we discussed the idea of there being such a thing as evil. The concept of evil can never really be confirmed or denied. According to Kant, there is no possibility of explaining evil people because we never judge others' actions because we do not know their true intentions. Like stated before, we all follow a law, and to be evil would be considered unnatural, therefore going against the natural law. With this in mind, we go into the possibility of us only considering people good only if their actions or views align with our own.
Okay. Well, there are a lot of things at that last paragraph. I mean, I didn't ask you about the question of evil in your papers, but understanding it might help us Kant's logic a little bit better. So one thing that I have to say, according to Kant, there is no possibility of explaining evil. That sentence suggests as if Kant said, oh, there's no possibility of explaining evil. It is something that I said that subsequent philosophers after Kant concentrated on the question of evil because according to Kant's philosophy, according to Kant's moral philosophy, there doesn't seem to be a way to explain the reality of evil. That's an important distinction. So Kant, I mean, he does concentrate on the possibility of evil in his other writings in moral philosophy a little bit, but subsequent philosophers, Schelling, for example, thought that Kant couldn't explain evil, and the reason for that is that you are either free and good or unfree and not good, which suggests that following laws of nature is the cause of evil. But according to a rational human being, why should I be immoral if I follow the laws of nature? I haven't made them. Somebody, like, that's the way in which the universe works. So I'm simply following the law. So I cannot be responsible for acting according to my nature. Now, what people look for after Kant is that, is it possible to be free and evil? Does human being have a fundamental capacity, not just acting morally outside of laws of nature, but acting immorally, evil, outside of laws of nature? So that remains as a question. And I think that all I want you to understand at this point is that Kant thinks that if you act according to laws of nature, you might be immoral, but you shouldn't be. It should not be the case that acting according to laws of nature is possibly evil. And we do, and that's sort of a tradition that comes from religion, Christianity, etc. Like whenever we talk about Christian anthropology and the way in which it characterizes human being, is that everything that is related to your body, that is related to your nature, to your physical nature, etc., is considered to be the source of evil. Therefore, most of our, for example, like sins are like, you know, like related to human body. And it's like, and as a 21st century rational human being, you should ask to yourself, like, why is it that doing some stuff that I'm supposed to do according to laws of nature is evil? And that's one of the things that people say, for example, in the past, that some Christians who did not approve certain actions considered them unnatural. And that's an argument that it's sometimes developed, that that goes against nature. It's like, something that goes against nature can never happen. That's the definition of natural law. Only a human being can do something unnatural. So that's the question. Like, if you cannot really condemn an action as unnatural, because if it is truly unnatural according to laws of nature, then it cannot happen. It would be called a miracle. That's the definition of miracle. So, like, you know, some people used to think, hopefully, I'm sure still think, ideas about homosexuality, if it is unnatural, it's really a miracle. And we should, like, really preserve miracles because it's yeah, whatever. So of course it's not unnatural, because it would not have happened if it were unnatural. Does that make sense? So you should be really careful in using the term nature and natural, because people usually designate things that are unnatural, especially politically, because they disapprove them, not because they really believe that it is unnatural. Okay, any other questions? Good protocol, thank you. Reaction, clap, okay. Any questions? Any questions about the paper? Now, Alvaro, does that explain the question that you had with respect to the immoral and amoral?
Yeah. You answered the question as you were discussing it.
Okay, so the idea then is, if it is a law of nature, we usually designate it morally amoral, like outside of the domain of morality. You know, it rains, nobody says it's evil, or earthquake is like, oh, it's a evil act, or all sorts of other things.
So anything outside of morality is not necessarily evil, is what you're, yeah.
That's
Okay.
what, yes, and you know, I mean, you think that too, according to Kant. That's sort of the rational. You don't sort of think that something like bad weather is evil or immoral. Now, this is a very difficult border to negotiate, because sometimes when we try to explain certain people's behavior with laws of nature, like psychology, like anthropology, etc., or with certain disciplines, since the actions themselves are already by some people judged as immoral, they see that explanation as a justification, as an excuse. So it has this really dangerous implication that if you understand something, you are endorsing it. Therefore, in order not to understand, not to endorse it, I need to not even try to understand it. And people feign this kind of like, oh, I can't even understand how people can do something like that. Of course, you can very well understand how they are doing. It's just that you don't want to appear to be approving it or justifying it. And that's a very slippery slope, because, we just had the anniversary of September 11th, and everybody, and the actual date of September 11th, I don't really understand how people can do something like that. As if you understand it, you will somehow justify it. So that has the impact of moral integrity, moral high ground, moral self-righteousness somehow excludes intellectual understanding. You should not understand it. You should not be a person who can understand this, because then it will be scary, because then you might either justify it or somehow agree with it. Now, you can understand something, doesn't mean that you need to agree with it. Doesn't mean you are justifying it, doesn't mean that you are approving it. But pretending not to understand it in the name of moral superiority is actually more harmful than understanding it. Is this point clear? I mean, this is my opinion. I mean, I don't know. I think that it is rational, but this is something that we think, not what Kant says. So it's important for us to make that distinction. So laws of nature explain why certain things happen the way they happen. And Kant always says that when we are ignorant about why something happened, we can either judge it as free because we are ignorant, or we pretend to be moral and self-righteous. I don't understand it. So. And that's really the sort of non-judgmental judgment, like, I cannot possibly understand it. It's like, well, try harder, you will. And that doesn't make you morally superior, it just makes you stupid. So. Okay, anybody wants to come back at this, like say no or disagree, or please?
Can I ask, like, I just keep thinking about Socrates and, like, the more I know nothing. Like, that, I don't know, I'm just trying to, like, I know it, like, doesn't have a connection, obviously, like, it's not for the paper, but just the idea that, like, it's just that you're, like, the more you know, there's, like, an entire world of knowledge that you don't know, like, the world of knowledge, like, in the paper.
Well, it's exactly the opposite of what is happening here. Like Socrates never proposes his ignorance as a moral superiority. So we are talking about something very specific here in Kant, or after Kantian philosophy. So when you look at an act, and then there's a perfectly natural explanation of that act, but as a human being, you say, oh, I don't even understand this. So our refusal to understand, it's really like feigning not understanding. It's not actual not understanding in a genuine Socratic way. We just sort of say, oh, I don't understand how people can do this. That kind of, that's not even like genuine ignorance. It's just ignorance saying that, oh, I'm so morally superior to those people, I cannot possibly understand how they did what they did. And that's really the sort of like that leads to the impossibility of empathy, because you just sort of say, oh, like, I cannot understand those people, right? So that's the distinction here. With Socrates, he is really against any kind of certainty with your judgment, sure. And the other type of ignorance that I'm talking about in terms of Kant, that actually comes from being sure. What are you sure of? That your moral superiority. And Socrates would never think. So I'm not really sure whether there is a strong connection, but if you are thinking along those lines, make sure that you don't confuse Socrates with a 21st century self-righteous moralist. Okay? Maya, does that help?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was laughing. That was your last comment was funny.
I mean, you know these people, right? They walk around and say, oh, I can't possibly understand it. Okay. Any questions?
I have a really random question, and feel free to say you don't want to answer it, but I was wondering, because I started watching the show The Good Place, and I don't know, have you seen it?
Apparently it gets better in the second season. I saw some episodes of the first season and I couldn't stand it, but I'll maybe give it a chance, because
I was wondering, because one of the characters is a professor of philosophy, and he teaches her like how to be a good person, and he uses Kant and a few other people. And I didn't like, I don't know, watching it was hard to tell if like what he was saying was actually in line with all of this. It's obvious that like they didn't, like, professors of philosophy didn't write the script or whatever, but
probably not. That's my suspicion with philosophy, the shows on television. But yeah, I don't know whether I saw that, but so I can't really comment. But if I find free time, I will look at it.
It's just in the first few episodes, even.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So people told me like that it gets better in the second season. Is that right?
I only just started it, so I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I've seen it like all the way through, and I liked the first season, but it definitely gets better in the second season too.
Okay. It's good that there's Kant on television. I'm happy. That will give some revelation. Any other shows that you are watching that is philosophical?
Yeah, I think you might really enjoy Curb Your Enthusiasm.
I can't stand him.
Why? You seem like you guys would be like right in line.
What's his name? David?
Larry David?
Larry David. Like, yeah, I can't stand him. I mean, did like Seinfeld, although it's politically very problematic today. But Larry David, I don't know. It's just like something that he shouldn't act. He should just write. So. Or he should only pretend to be Bernie Sanders. That's the only thing. So, but yeah, and also, yeah, I did watch some, like my colleague Joanna Swanger, Gypsy, loves Curb Your Enthusiasm, and she gave it to me. The old one, I mean the initial one. But thanks for the suggestion. Like, I don't know, maybe I should go back. It has been a while, so. Any other TV recommendations? Yeah, we should talk about that in the second half of the class after you do the evaluations. Because like certain dramatic illustrations can be inspiring but also misleading. So any questions about the papers? Has anyone finished?
I have like a paragraph left at most.
Oh, please. Okay. Good.
Same here.